Welcome to this new series for The Good, the Bad and the Odd, which concerns itself with the X-Files in chronological order, every TV show and the films, and joining me for this first episode and episodes to come is Rebecca Booth. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. We actually have been planning this for a long time now, haven't we? And various life events and so on and so forth have sort of delayed this. But I think we're finally kicking off, and I'm kind of really keen to get the ball rolling. I do love my X-Files, so I'm really keen to start watching them all again. Let's both talk about our X-Files background for a bit. Do you want to go first? Do you want to tell us how you came to the X-Files?
Yeah, so originally it aired, first of all, in 1993, I believe. And I'm not sure when exactly I caught it as a child, but I just remember my mum and dad watching it. And I kind of caught the odd one. I didn't watch it all the way through. So it was just something really iconic. You know, when you think back to your childhood in the 90s and, you know, WWF, I think it was back then, and, you know, certain songs and everything. And, you know, I was a big fan of Buffy, but The X-Files was always kind of there, even though I didn't follow it to the letter. It was, like I say, you know, the theme tune I remember was just really terrifying. As a child, it was that kind of level of, because I was always into horror. But it was that kind of child-friendly kind of sci-fi stroke horror, but it always kind of got me. I remember, even to this day, I love that, the credit sequence. Yeah. And then when I was older, I'd say my late teens, that's when I kind of started right at the beginning and worked my way through.
Yeah, I am actually, I was there at the beginning. I remember watching the pilot when it was on. I think it was in it aired actually in 94 in the UK. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
There was a significant delay, but we were aware of it. It kind of, a couple of years before the X-Files, there was a massive TV event with Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And I do remember the sort of hype around the X-Files before it actually aired was kind of significant. I was certainly aware it was coming. It wasn't as big as Twin Peaks at the time, but it was there and it was coming, and people were aware it was coming on. So I remember seeing it and going to work and people talking about it straight away. It was people watching it right from the beginning and talking about it. You know, obviously that initial sort of levels of interest was because of the hype, but you know, It carried on. So I, as I say, I watched it from the beginning. Having said that, it aired, I think, in the UK first on Sky One, which is a satellite channel, a big satellite channel, but a satellite. So, and I didn't have Sky at that time, so I would have waited for the BBC Two premiere. So I was kind of waiting for it to appear. It had already aired somewhat. Some people had seen it, but I do remember when it aired on BBC Two at work, people were talking about it. So it's kind of cool. And I watched it pretty much, certainly the first 4 seasons, but then me and my wife had our first child, and when that happens, you know, the last thing you do is watch TV and stuff. And so there was like a gap of like 4 years when I didn't really watch anything significant. But I certainly did get back into the X-Files when I started to have time. Now, funny enough, in the early 2000s, I was running a website that was like price comparing DVDs, and I got a lot of freebies. And they sort of would ask, what would you like? You know, it wasn't just new stuff. It was like, what would you like? And the first things I put down was box sets of the X-Files. And I still got those DVDs, though they look pretty bad now. But you know, that was the way I got them. So I did get all 9 of the original series on these sort of freebie X-Files.
Awesome.
So lucky old me. So that's how I picked them up. And I do remember sitting on the train with a portable DVD player and watching episodes to and from work. So I'd watch 2 a day. Sometimes with the X-Files, though, you kind of quickly have to slam the lid down because, you know, there's blood or something, an autopsy or something like that. So I managed to catch them that way. It is a show in the zeitgeist, and Duchovny was kind of familiar because he was in Twin Peaks, so he had that sort of kudos as well. and it just worked. And of course, we currently live in a golden age of TV where there's probably dozens of really quite good shows on. We weren't that fortunate in the 90s. It was like, in terms of science fiction, fantasy, horror stuff, we had after Twin Peaks, we had the X-Files, and we had Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was about it. So we were kind of starved as well of this kind of thing. The show creator is Chris Carter, and I'm sure you know all of this. Let's just say for the listeners, he was pretty much inspired quite significantly by Kolchak the Night Stalker, which was a sort of a horror show that ran in the 70s with oh man, I've forgotten his name. No, I haven't. Darren McGavin. Darren McGavin is a reporter, Kolchak, who kept encountering sort of monsters and this, that, and the other. He was initially in 2 TV films that were very, very successful: The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. And then it spun into a TV series, which unfortunately became a bit unbelievable. This reporter kept encountering these weird and wonderful monsters. But there are some great episodes of that, but there are some very old ones, like, he's a headless biker that is in one, and the worst looking kind of weird dinosaur monster you've ever seen in another. I mean, really terrible. But having said that, I do love Darren McGavin as an actor anyway, and he was just perfect as Kolchak. He was a direct influence of the show, but there are other influences, and you can, if you've seen these films, you kind of spot them. Silence of the Lambs was an influence. All the President's Men, that whole conspiracy theory with Nixon and stuff like that. Yeah, there's definitely bits of the X-Files where you get that kind of vibe too. Though the X-Files is way more audience friendly than that movie, and there was various others. I mean, some unkinder people suggest Scooby-Doo as well. And you can kind of see that. It was a kind of, I think one of the reasons it was so successful for so long is they found this really quite successful blend of mixing up a longer running story arc with kind of what's commonly called Monster of the Week episodes. Though I do think the Monster of the Week's a bit broad. There are different types of monsters. For example, there's supernatural, there's real life criminal ones. There's all sorts. There's scientifically based ones, and so on and so forth. Though they, in a very broad sort of description, they kind of fall into this arc, alien arc story and Monster of the Week. Do you have a preference? Do you like both elements of it, or do you prefer Monster of the Week, or what's your preference on these?
I think both. I mean, the general kind of story arc that continues all the way through, specifically with, the pair's relationship and how they work as, skeptic and believer, and also Mulder's kind of personal story with his sister. That works really well against the Monster of the Week, or whatever you want to call them, episodes. But they're, like, you've alluded to, they're actually a lot cleverer, I think, than just Monster of the Week. And indeed, as the series progresses, I think that you get meta elements. There's all sorts in there.
Yeah, I mean, this variation also allows the tone of the show to change from week to week too, without being jarring. We get goofy light ones, and we get quite dark, serious ones. And you and I were on another United Nations Horror podcast recently discussing an episode from season 4, Home, which I suggested in that podcast was probably one of the horror high points of the 90s, that particular episode. But even in that, Mulder's cracking the odd joke as well, even among the grimness. I think Chris Carter also really lucked out. Is it like, I don't know, in the casting. It just there was some sort of perfection with David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. It just really works. So even when we get weak episodes, it's still extremely watchable.
Yeah.
It's just a watchable show. It's almost like comfort TV, isn't it? It's kind of,
Yeah.
you know exactly where you are. You know you're gonna have a good story, even though it can be sometimes a bit incoherent or whatever. But you're going to enjoy these characters. That's the main thing. Okay, let's. I mean, we've got potentially years to discuss all of the X-Files, so let's crack on with our specific episodes. But what I might do is, for each episode we do, I might focus on one particular point of the X-Files and sort of expand on that, as well as discuss episodes. So we got, you know, something, not just episodes, we got sort of elements of the X-Files, but I'll give that, we'll discuss that, and as we go we can sort of work it out. Okay, the first episode is the pilot. Now, in this one, there's it starts off very odd. I'm not going to go through this sort of scene by scene or anything like that, but essentially it starts off very odd with like lights in the woods and a sort of silhouetted figure, and it's sort of hinting at abduction and things like that. But essentially what it is classmates from a certain sort of school and class appear to be taken into the woods and die. And there's some sort of alien abduction sort of vibe to it. And there's also kind of survivors of that, but they're in a bad state. There's one guy that's catatonic, for example, or in a certain type of coma. It's kind of an odd thing. You know, he's sitting there with his eyes open, but he can't kind of react. So someone is taking him into the woods, and they appear to be killed when there's a flash of bright light. Now, this is the opener. Sets up the X-Files universe. I've heard people, when discussing pilots, say all a pilot has to do is set up the universe. It doesn't even have to be very good. It just sets up the universe. Do you think this particular episode is a good pilot in that it sets up the universe and makes us understand the relationships?
Completely. And generally, I'm usually disappointed with pilots because, like you say, they're just there to get that information across, and the tone of the whole program hasn't quite worked. You know, it's not gelled yet. But I've got to admit, it's probably my favourite pilot of any TV show.
It's a good part. I'd have to put Twin Peaks higher, and possibly a few other shows like The Prisoner. But I think it's a really good pilot too. I agree with you there, and it's interesting that some of the elements in it actually go through the entire series, and it wasn't planned that way. The cigarette smoking man being the main one I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
Him being present at the very beginning is very sort of interesting. I find it kind of, wow, that's amazing playing. But Chris Carter's always said, nah, that was just, he was an interesting looking actor, and we wanted to set up some sort of element of paranoid sort of someone else watching things. Kind of interesting. In fact, this episode does actually remind me of elements of the 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where there's certain characters walking around in offices, and even there's even people walking down corridors just talking, and if you're really observant and watch that film, you'll see silhouettes standing behind glass doors, just standing there, that aren't part of the foreground of the scene, but they're just there to add to the paranoia. This episode kind of reminded me of that kind of vibe, somewhat. It is a good it is a good pilot, but I did find the plot very convoluted. We'll get into that, but I kind of agree with you. It really does set up the relationship really well. One of the things I didn't mention is Chris Carter also cited that he always wanted the relationship between the two main characters to be platonic. He was basing it kind of on the British TV show The Avengers, which is Emma Peel and John Steed. He wanted that kind of relationship. I don't think they got that kind of relationship, but it is definitely platonic, and they're very respectful of each other, aren't they? Even though they argue and have different viewpoints, they look after each other. They back each other up.
Yeah.
There are some goofy elements. I have to say, I do like the first meeting between Mulder and Scully. It's very funny. basically he starts telling her about herself, if I remember rightly, and mentions she had a dissertation about Einstein, which actually is referenced in the latest series that's just been on. There's an Agent Einstein in it, and I think Mulder made a reference of when he first met Scully talking about Einstein, and we see it here. It's a great. It was a nice callback in that series 10 to sort of mention that. I also like the fact Scully's saying, I'm looking forward to working with you, and Mulder says, "Oh, I thought you were just here to spy on me," with that twinkle in his eye that Mulder has.
Yeah.
He's very fun. He's very fun to cover.
It really is, isn't it? It's very, like you say, there's a lot of subtle layers to it, and that's, I think really down to Chris Carter and the way that it's structured in terms of the dialogue, that, it opens with Scully in her scenes actually at a hearing, and she is asked about Mulder and his reputation, and she reels off all the information we need about him, and then he kind of turns that around on her when she enters. And we get that initial line of him, says, "Sorry, nobody down here but the FBI is most unwanted."
Most unwanted, yeah, very nice. It was. You do get the impression that these guys are trying to get Scully to sort of debunk it, but she's there just to get on with her work. And I actually believe her when she says, "I'm looking forward to working with you." She kind of seems interested, not too interested, but certainly interested to meet him. I don't think they talk about it that much in this, but I think the idea is Mulder is pretty much a genius. And I think that intrigues Scully, even though that's all, background detail. We're not given that at all in the script. You just get that kind of impression.
No, definitely. Again, and that's, I think, down to the clever dialogue in that she talks about his reputation, and she says, he's basically the violent crime unit's best behavioural analyst. So, and that picks up again, I think, in episodes 4 in Conduit, he gives a little bit more information about it and how that kind of level of genius and reputation gave him the freedom to be able to dig around and get into the X-Files. And I thought it was a really nice little touch. Yeah,
indeed. We will come on to Conduit, but there's a lot in there that you find out a fair bit more about Mulder in that, and how he's held and how he got where he is. I also want to, again, you've already mentioned it, Chris Carter's dialogue is great in the way that it's simple, but it allows itself to be interpreted. It's not really, A to B kind of dialogue. It's kind of open, and it allows the actors to sort of put their own spin on it, because it is that way. It's a bit like like Shakespeare does it. It has many interpretations, and the actor can put their own spin on it, their own way. And it's a really good example of that is the line that Mulder has to say to Scully in these scenes, which is, "Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials?" Now, there's several ways that an actor could have done that, and I think the dialogue's very simple but open, as I say, but the spin that Duchovny puts on it is fantastic. He's really having fun there. "Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials?" And they're like grand, almost like what's his name? The guy that does the Night Gallery and Twilight Zone. It's got kind of grand voice. It did make me laugh. As I mentioned, the plot's kind of a bit odd, frankly. They have to go and investigate these events, and they dig up a coffin, and it appears to be possibly an orangutan in it at one point. It basically rolls down the hill, doesn't it? And the coffin splits open when they exhume it. And there's like the sheriff's kind of not wanting them to be there. In fact, he kicks them off of a crime scene, at gunpoint at one point. And there's also a doctor who did sign off some of the autopsies, who's obviously not too happy. So, and a lot of these plots don't get resolved. Why was that thing in that coffin? There's an intimation that it was human and it somehow got changed, or it was an orangutan.
Yeah, and then we get the great line off Mulder as well about he won't make the varsity team.
Yeah, again,
Which made me laugh.
joking. And another thing that kind of makes me laugh in this one, but it dramatically looks really good, is they constantly have really long, detailed conversations in the pelting rain.
Yes, and it wasn't until I was listening to another podcast about the first episode, and they mentioned that apparently they were in when it's absolutely torrential. It was at the end of the day filming, and it was David Duchovny making Gillian Anderson just laugh so much. And when you look back, you can tell they're both absolutely
They try not
cracking
to
up.
laugh. Right. Yeah, she did have a semi-hysterical vibe that actually worked quite well. But yeah, that's,
Yeah, it did in the end.
I
It worked well.
I think I may have listened to that podcast. Was it Shinstroglu versus
Yes.
Pogba? Yes. Yes. I'm a big fan of that podcast, and they do have the odd X-File episode. I could definitely recommend, if you like the X-Files, go and listen to their few episodes on it. They're a lot of fun. Don't expect any respectful stuff though, that's for sure. Yeah, so the plotting's all over the place, and we kind of find out what's behind. I mean, I did say at the beginning, but I guess this entire set of stuff is going to be spoiler filled. I think it would be fair if we don't spoil future events, but we're going to spoil the episodes we're going to talk about. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But to me, the plotting didn't really matter. It just had a really great atmosphere and mood. As I say, it was kind of cool to watch them in the rain, but it was like, get an umbrella, you know? Do something, get in the car, do something. Don't just shout at each other in the rain. And they did it at least twice. It might have been even 3 times. And I just like some of the other little touches, like they go and talk to the nurse, and she said, no, he's been here all night, and the Mulder starts looking at his feet and stuff like that. What's he doing? You know, it's kind of stuff like that. It was a good, fun episode. Well, shall we get to rating this one? What would you give this one out of 10?
Like I say, this was probably my favourite pilot episode because it's got everything in it, and the way that it sets it up, it's really clever. The humour, and you initially get that, rapport between the characters, and their relationship just gels as well. So I think I'd have to give it a 9 out of 10.
I think that sounds fair from what you said. I'm not quite that taken with it. If the plot had been slightly less convoluted and weird, I'm not so bothered about being convoluted and weird. Actually, it's the fact it wasn't really resolved. There were, why was the orangutan in the coffin? Why was it those kids and not other kids? Why were the adults covering up? All of these sort of things bother me a little, but not enough to not enjoy it thoroughly. I'd give it 8 out of 10. It is my rating. So it sounds like we both hold it pretty highly.
Yep.
For the next episode, which is actually, I don't know, in some chronologies, this is episode 1 and the first one's episode 0, but we'll stick with episode 2. This was kind of a second pilot. I think there was quite a gap between the pilot and the next one. Gillian Anderson looks slightly different.
She
though
does.
It might be just the makeup. I think in this one, her makeup's almost a bit gothy in places. It doesn't suit her.
I thought it was
she
like
looks
intention-
okay.
Yeah, it seemed to be like an intentional kind of, change to her character. They were trying to style her in a different way.
Maybe make her look older. I mean, she was quite young when this was made. Though I always thought she had, she had gravitas from the beginning. So how young she was didn't really matter. She wasn't like a giggling fool or anything like that. She wasn't obviously a 22-year-old. Let's put it that way. She was.
Yeah.
She portrayed someone with much more gravitas than that. So I don't think it mattered personally. Anyway, this episode's called Deep Throat. Again, a callback to All the President's Men there, somewhat. There's suspicious things happening at a military base. Pilots on a secret sort of test environment, secret program, are kind of being affected and showing signs of, confusion, disorientation, all possible symptoms of deep stress from the work they're doing. We kind of get Mulder talking to Scully about. I think it was in a bar, but he encounters a chap who he calls Deep Throat, who warns him not to cross the military. Anyway, he does manage to get Scully to go along, and he starts telling her about Roswell. So we're getting the sort of alien arc fairly early on here.
Yeah.
And she's saying, "What, you think they're flying UFOs?" And he says, "No, I think they're flying aircraft built from UFO technology." They meet the wife of one of the guys that's affected, and I think the first time we see him, he's got a horrible skin rash all over him, isn't he?
Yeah, he has, yeah.
Which he kind of recovers from, and it doesn't really get explained other than it might be stress. I think the wife does mention that he started getting like a rash under his arms, and she thought it was to do with stress. And then at a dinner party, he put fish food on over his dinner. Which I'm guessing is probably a real symptom. That sounds so bizarre. I think Chris Carter might have read that as a symptom of stress or something. I don't know. And again, I think this one kind of echoes elements of Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. There's certainly a section where the wife goes, "That's not my husband," which is a mirror of a scene from that movie. There's definitely a scene from that movie that played it felt almost word for word, but I haven't seen that movie in years. It was kind of. What did you think of the acting of the other characters in this? The other actors.
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought that scene in particular was really creepy.
The wife was good, I thought. Yeah, it was kind of effective. We also get a couple of stoner teenagers, don't we? A boy and a girl. And Seth Green's the boy with a little, not goatee, but what do they call it? Soul patch or something. And a kind of goofy girl. And they basically... Mulder takes Scully to sort of case the base, and they encounter these teenagers. First they see lights, don't they? They see two lights flying around at impossible speeds, which then shoot up into the sky. And I like the fact Scully said, "No, well, it could be lasers." And then when they shoot up in the sky, we kind of hear a sonic boom, which leaves her a bit open-mouthed. And then they encounter these two teenagers who, they don't know they pull a gun on them. But then they realise they're just teenagers, put it away. And then another light's approaching them, it turns out a helicopter. So they all run away. And Mulder starts sort of questioning the teenagers, and they start telling about, that's the ship I've seen. Also, a bit before that, Mulder goes into like a cafe, and there's pictures of like a triangular UFO on the wall, and the woman's selling them for $20 a shot. And he buys one, and Scully just goes, "Sucker." That made me laugh. So there's that going on. So it's kind of, Seth Green's got a lot of presence, hasn't he? I mean, you can see why he kind of got more famous. He was pretty good in this.
Yeah.
And I also like when they finally drop him off, and Mulder just goes, "Later, dude."
Well, that's it. Again, his personality really comes through, because he buys that photo, and as Scully leaves and she's looking at the map, when he comes out, she says, "Oh, the base isn't on the map." He's, by talking to the woman and buying the photo, and being him, he's managed to find out exactly where this base is.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice kind of use of, like I say, not only his humour, but just those really kind of, nuanced kind of details for the characters.
Yeah. I mean, Mulder always seems to get on with people around him, doesn't he? Scully's a little more standoffish. She's certainly more professional, whereas he just gets stuck in. And he'll happily be devil's advocate. Like, there's a scene in a bar, isn't it, where he goes, "What's that tattoo?" He knows what it is. And he says, "Ain't you a believer?" The guy says, "Ain't you a believer?" And he says, "No, I think it's baloney." So then the buyer says, "Well, you want to come down to so-and-so, like Okie Pokey or whatever." I can't remember what it was. He mentioned that at the beginning, didn't he? Because he said, I think Scully's saying, "Why are we investigating this and not the €100, the lizard, the woman that's given birth to the lizard baby?" And Mulder actually says, "Because it's not near Lake Okefenokee or whatever it is." So they actually, have I got this confused? Have I?
That's Conduit.
Yeah,
I
I've
think.
got. Sorry, I've watched 3 in one day. I've got confused. I just realised I got too confused.
No, it's true though because they're actually very similar.
They are very
These
similar.
two episodes, because they're so close together.
Yeah. So Scully, Mulder says, "Well, it's time to go back now. You know, there's nothing more to it. So let's go." And he says, "Yeah, okay," and then he drives off. And gets the teenagers to show him a hole in the fence, and tells it to tell him whereabouts they go to observe. So he goes in, and then we get a slightly ropey special effects. I think. What do you think of the special effects?
They're, obviously dated now. I mean, I'm guessing they look better on your Blu-ray.
They look worse. No, I mean, yeah, the bits that aren't CGI look great. I haven't mentioned my Blu-ray set, have I? Have I ever mentioned that to you?
No, I don't think you have.
I've got these on Blu-ray, and I have to say, some of the night stuff is not that good, but pretty much everything shot during the day is pristine, and it looks like it was shot yesterday. It looks fantastic. They've done a great restoration. I think it's because they shot in HD and they shot in widescreen too.
Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, I've heard of some sets where they've gone to widescreen and it looks a bit goofy because they've either trimmed or they've they had widescreen shots, but they've left like camera staff in the sides of the shots, and
Yeah.
none of that with this. It all looks great. I have to say this all. I don't know about the US, but this entire 9 seasons of the X-Files is on Amazon UK for streaming. I think it's in HD as well. I'm not entirely sure on that. How do you watch it, Becky? Is it Amazon?
Yeah, when I get paid next, I am definitely getting the box set.
Yeah, I thought it was off the market again, but
Oh,
I thought it was only a limited run. But they'll probably, if it's sold out that fast, they'll do it again.
yeah.
It's really nice. Anyway, okay. So we get Mulder sort of caught, and actually there is a scene where he's in a. Let me think. There is a scene in a bar, and we see some bloke drive up outside and say on the radio, "Open the cage" or something like that. Suggesting a trap's being set.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mulder gets taken in, and he's. We see him kind of wheel through things and see weird things like people working on ships, and it's all a bit vague and fuzzy. But then when he eventually gets returned to Scully, she gets a call, and he's obviously had something done to him because he just can't remember what happened. But one guy dropping him off actually says to Scully, "The response, our response to this was appropriate for the things we need to protect," or something along those lines. Basically, you bought this on yourself, kind of thing. And then we see Mulder. Mulder is obviously disorientated when he leaves, but we do see a little later on Mulder doing laps, and he encounters Deep Throat again, who says he'll help Mulder if it serves his own interests. So this is really the first episode where we're getting into the alien conspiracy cover-up stuff at a government level. I mean, the first one was more local, I think.
You get the Pentagon shot at the end of the first one, don't you?
Oh, you do? Yes, I've forgotten all about that. Yes, actually, I did want to talk about that. That's the first time I think that the X-Files references a movie. And the X-Files does reference a lot of movies. It's I think the writers delight in it somewhat, actually. And that was referencing Raiders at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was kind of cool, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And again, puts the cigarette smoking man front and centre in terms of who's the person behind everything, kind of something. Unintentionally, of course, but even so, that's how it is. So basically, we're seeing there's bigger fish. There's bigger things going on. Deep Throat being involved is kind of first warns him off and then says he'll help him where it's appropriate. And there's some good lines in this. There was a bit where right at the end, Deep Throat says, "I'm going to read this verbatim. Mr. Mulder, why are those like yourself who believe in the existence of extraterrestrial life on this earth not dissuaded by all the evidence to the contrary? And Mulder replies, because all the evidence to the contrary is not entirely dissuasive. Now, I probably butchered that, but when those guys delivered it, it sounded really good.
Yeah.
And it worked. And there's also a final thing where Mulder says to Deep Throat, they're here, aren't they? And Deep Throat says, yep, they've been here for a long, long time. So confirming his sort of beliefs. So, should we rate this one again? I mean, it did feel more like almost more like a second pilot than a second episode, somewhat. But it was pretty solid. I mean, there was a bit of dodgy CGI, but I think it was kind of coherent and cool. And the acting I thought was uniformly pretty good. What would sorry, give us your comments on it.
I think in terms of rating, I would give it an 8, and I think, like you say, it's a really good complementary watch with the pilot. In that, like, they're kind of the same thing. Yeah, they work better as a whole. Again, the story is a little bit patchy, I think, like the first one, but it's just sets up, like you say, that whole world. I love the character of Deep Throat. I love that. Like you say, that's really the start of, although we see the bit with Pentagon in the first episode, this is really the start of, how deep everything goes, and that end line that they've been here for a long, long time. I remember the first time I watched it, it just gave me chills. Yeah. So I really, really liked it. It was kind of setting up that story arc that will continue right through. Yeah. So, yeah, 8 for me. Yeah,
it's very solid. I think it's actually a more coherent story than the pilot, actually. It works from beginning to end. Do you know what I mean? Everything lines up and it all works. And we're kind of given hints of things. And it's a neat TV trick for Mulder to see more than he should and then have his memory wiped. But us as the audience see some of it too. So we're kind of tantalised in a quite nifty way. I don't think I'd rate it as high as you. I'd give it probably a 7 out of 10. I think it's a solid episode though, and I rather enjoyed seeing it again. And I think I've watched it 3 or 4 times, and each time I kind of see slightly different things in it. The sort of interactions between the wives, for example, was kind of interesting. Something I hadn't picked up. There's one, this wife who's terrified for her husband's sake, goes and takes them to another house, and the other wife says, "Why are you bringing the FBI to my house?" she says on the QT kind of thing. I thought that was kind of cool too. But 7 out of 10 for me, this one. Now, I believe, the next one we're going to discuss is Squeeze, but I believe that the sort of network really weren't sure what to make of this show, and were wondering, is it going to be all about these aliens? Week in, week out? And I think Squeeze, both the quality of Squeeze and the sort of fact it was a complete deviation and something completely different, was the thing that sort of solidified that X-Files was like not just going to be this A to B kind of slow burn towards an end. It was going to be jumping around, and I think this episode possibly was the one that solidified this sort of reputation of the X-Files forever, almost. It's just such a solid episode. This one really gave me the chills when I first saw it, and it was definitely the water cooler one. I'd already mentioned we talked about our work from week 1, but this one was you basically got to work and said, "Did you see the X-Files?" It was like, yeah, and it was it was definitely like that. It was quite an impactful episode. Tell us some of your thoughts about it. How about firstly, let's do pre-credit sequence.
I actually, watching it for this recording, is terrifying. To this day, it's one of the scariest things I think on television. And that, we had obviously pre-credit sequence before it in the previous episodes, but here, not only was it scary, but the way it was set up, like the camera work, really reminded me of the way that a slasher film is kind of filmed.
Indeed. Indeed. It's
So it was that real horror element, and how, like you say, it references various specific television programs or films, but just in the kind of formal construction of that initial scene, I thought it was fantastic. And the eyes,
that reminded me of a few things, but most significantly, it reminds me of Pennywise the Clown.
Yes.
So, as I've already said, the X-Files does riff on other TV shows and movies, and that and also great casting. That guy is fantastic as Tooms.
Yeah.
He's so creepy and weird, and those eyes, those yellow eyes. Ugh. I mean, some of it's a bit silly. I mean, the fact he can kind of unscrew screws from the inside.
Yeah, that did get me.
That doesn't work. That's not real, but it doesn't matter. It's still damn creepy, and that whole struggle and the noise, and then we see a bit of dripping blood is kind of it really got to me. I think here also we're getting a really obvious callback to Kolchak. The story, I could be wrong, it's been a while since I've seen it. The story of the second Kolchak movie, The Night Strangler, it does involve a man, it's either the liver or the pancreas of his victims in order to get this elixir to keep him immortal. He's a much more intelligent sort of character than Tooms, though. He can talk, and he's obviously well educated, whereas Tooms is kind of a weird, not silent, but more monosyllabic kind of character, and you can't quite read him. He's got when he's not growling and stuff, he's got a very dead-eyed expression, hasn't he?
It's just like impassive.
So we get a definite reference to Kolchak, and also this bit, it starts showing us the horror credentials of the series, doesn't it? For sure. Yeah. So this is the first Monster of the Week episode, really. So we got all this mysterious stuff of, what is Tooms as well? Is he some sort of mutation, evolutionary change? We don't know what he is. It doesn't really matter. He's obviously human, but he's different. That's kind of the tack of this. So it's not aliens this time, it's something else. Now, they get called in by... Hold on. I have to be careful because I keep confusing the episodes. They get called in by a colleague of Scully on this, don't we? Who's Colton, yes. His name is. Did you catch the reference to the Twin Towers bombing?
No.
Yeah, there's a reference to... Colton mentions about work on the... he came up because he did some analysis, which...
Oh, wow.
But not that... This isn't the... the 9/11.
No, that was the event before that.
There was a van
bombing.
Was driven into the plaza. They're talking about that, but it's very jarring to see an episode where they talk about the Twin Towers. It feels really odd now, but there was this other event. I think there may have even been another event with a very light, small aircraft as well. But I'm a bit rusty on that. But the one they were talking about was a bomb involving a van being driven into the plaza. We're also kind of starting to see a definite pattern here of Scully being the skeptic to Mulder. And we do get that to and fro where sort of Scully says, well, there needs to be a scientific explanation. And Mulder quite wisely often counters it with, well, let's go find out. That's often his approach, isn't it? He just suggests there's other possibilities and they should just wait and see. I really, there was some great dialogue in this too. I also like where Cole, when he first turns up, so Scully basically says, "Shall I bring Mulder?" And the guy Colton sort of says, "If you want to, I think he does want Mulder to come along because he knows his reputation, but he doesn't want to specifically ask for Mulder." And he even makes fun of Mulder. He says, "What do you think? Does this look like the work of Little Green Men?" And Mulder messes with his head, doesn't he? He says,
Yeah.
no, they're reticulans and they extract livers and stuff like this.
And the guy's like, you can't be serious.
Yeah. And then he actually comes up with a line, do you have any idea what liver and onions go for in particular? That's kind of funny. And Scully says, why do you keep putting, a bit later on, why do you keep pushing their buttons? Why'd you do that? And he says something like, sometimes the need to mess with their heads outweighs the humiliation. It's something like that. It's kind of pretty funny.
But again, we even, like, from his characterization, we just see he's running circles around them. And that's even more apparent when he does his research and finds out all that information about the previous cases, the historical aspects of it.
Yes. He's obviously way above it. And I really like the fact that they hone in. Basically, Scully describes the sort of character they're looking for fairly early. He says someone who works with buildings and this, that and the other. And they actually catch the guy, and are pretty sure it is him. Mulder and Scully, certainly Mulder is pretty sure it is him, but the other people just don't see it at all, So they're onto their guy pretty early. It's a nice convention. It's a nice change of convention, because in a lot of, like, cop shows or detective shows, that they don't work out who it is till right at the end, or they've got a suspicion, but it's not right at the beginning, whereas these guys, Mulder and Scully, get onto it pretty early, and it's just trying to prove it to other people. And she's kind
of in his position. That's what I love about this episode, along with her friend, who's talking about being fast tracked and how she can get out of the X-Files and, get her career on track, really.
Yeah.
It's playing all that against Mulder, and she starts to defend Mulder a lot of the time as well, because of how they're being, like you say, they're basically taking the piss out of him. Yeah. And he's always truthful, he's straight, he's intelligent. So I thought it was a really clever way to kind of make them even more of a force, a pairing together.
Yeah, and we also, to go with that, we get a sense of their sort of operational isolation in that, Scully decides she's on Mulder's side, so they're kind of isolating is too strong a word. They're kind of operationally isolated. That they still working with other people, but they're kind of aware that they're held this way. Mulder certainly is he obviously doesn't care. I don't think he cares. He really is. He certainly isn't capable of playing the game, playing the political game of sort of keeping it quiet while he's doing his own thing. He'll just say it if he thinks it's true, like you said, kind of thing. We get we also we see Toomes sort of operating out, after we see the lie detector test, which is pretty interesting, and we get Toomes being very sort of dead-eyed and just answering questions, and then the question about, are you, I can't remember, it sounded like, are you 103 years old or something, I don't know, something like that, and they said that must be a control question, and Mulder says, no, I wanted that one in, and they kind of, the guy that's in charge is kind of peeved at Mulder and wants him to stay out of their way, but luckily, because of the sort of the jurisdiction, that they don't have to leave, they can still be part of it. It's there is a few weak things in this episode. The effects, the stretching effects are not great, but it's a thing of its time. It didn't ruin the show at all for me watching again. It was fine. I felt that some of the acting of the other characters was a little weak. Colton seemed to be a little weak in terms of acting. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
But his boss was okay, and some of the other characters, making fun of Mulder, calling him spooky and stuff, they were okay. They were okay. I think it was really nice to see the consolidation of the sort of relationship between Scully and Mulder in this. It really worked, and it was just a great episode. I have to say, I probably hold this one as one of the great Monster of the Week episodes, actually.
Yes.
And it's quite impressive they do this in episode 3 of season 1.
Yeah.
They're able to create something so great. Any last thoughts on it before we score this one?
Not really. Just to say, like you said that the other kind of plots of the previous two episodes were a little bit convoluted, but I thought they really nailed this.
Yeah. There was no bugginess at all in the plot, was there?
No.
There was definite threat. You did think Scully was in trouble when Toombs was attacking her at the end. Certainly when he lifted her shirt and pulled his hand back, that's a bit, whoa. Yeah. But they managed to catch him without shooting him, which is also a nice trait in the X-Files. They kind of tend not to it's not an action show. Well, it has action, but it's realistic.
It's not like Diagnosis Murder where there's always a jump at the end, is there?
It's and we also see that spooky scene of Toombs. Well, actually, they go see an old ex-police officer, don't they, who tells them about these murders. And we see a shot of him open the paper and see that they've caught Toombs, and he recognises the face, and he kind of breaks down. And there's a really nice transition of him looking at the paper and the face of Toombs on the paper to suddenly that paper ripping, and it's Toombs ripping up a newspaper to chew it up to make a nest.
Yeah.
While he's caught, and he's looking through the vent. It's a narrow vent, but he's looking through it, and we know what Toombs can do. And it's kind of spooky. And in fact, he comes back, doesn't he? There is an action. It's one of these. This one's a rare one in that it's got a sequel episode.
Yes.
Several episodes later as well. It's not just a two-parter. There's a distinct gap. So it's kind of. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. I don't remember that one half as well as this one, so I'm kind of looking forward to getting back to that one and seeing a bit more Toombs. Anyway, rating for this one.
This one I think would be a 9 because, like I said, it's still absolutely terrifying. It's such a simple premise. And even though, like you say, some of the effects don't hold up, just things like the contacts, something that simple, really, give it the kind of chill factor. The story's great. It kept me absolutely on the edge of my seat. And it was a great story.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, like you say, it's amazing. This is the 3rd episode. And with Home, I think they're my two favourite kind of Monster of the Week episodes.
Yes, I agree with you. I give it a 9 out of 10 as well. It's close to a 10. There's just a few sort of minor issues here and there, but
yes,
it's perfect. The guy that played Toombs is perfectly casted. He's a creepy little dude in real life, though, isn't he? He married he was 15. He married a 16-year-old girl recently.
Oh, is that him?
Yeah. And I've seen him recently he was really good in Punisher Warzone. He played a character called Looney Bin Jim, who, again, ripped out people's organs, but this time it was because if they annoyed him. But he was pretty creepy in that too. Okay, let's go to number 4 in our list. Conduit. Now, in this one, a girl appears to have been abducted, but she's left behind a mother and a little brother. Now, Mulder wants to look into it. Scully's not convinced it's really an X-File, but he points out to her that the mother was a Girl Scout in the 60s who was one of the people that saw this UFO. So there's a connection. So it's that's how it starts. They go on. What do you think of this episode?
I thought it was great in terms of the kind of 4 initial episodes. It was a perfect little package in terms of the story arcs and just setting up so much detail. You've kind of packed everything into these 4 episodes that basically encapsulates what the whole series is about as it goes through, however, the 10 series of the show.
Yeah. I wasn't as struck by this episode. I think it had some nice touches, certainly in terms of Mulder's vulnerabilities. Let's put it that way. It's just I found it was one of these episodes where the plot didn't, all the elements they just packed in loads of stuff that never gets resolved, and it's kind of a bit frustrating. There's also a few dry spots, and they kind of try and use dramatic tricks to keep up the tension. The worst example of that was there's a bit in a library where it's almost like watching a conspiracy film, a deep dark conspiracy, but basically it's a girl talking, being jealous for a boy, and this other girl, and it's kind of a bit silly from that point of view, but there was definitely elements I liked, for sure, but I think it's one of those episodes that highlight some of the weaknesses of the show in terms of setting up all these grand ideas and not resolving them in any kind of coherent way. So as a viewer, you kind of finish the episode and say, well, why did they have that in it? What was the point of that? Like, there's weird stuff in here, like there's wolves and burnt treetops and stuff like, stuff not explained. There's kind of it, we as viewers are led to believe she was abducted, and the kind of proof, there's certain bits of proof around that. Certainly a blood test, for example, is consistent with prolonged weightlessness, for example. But there's also some cool stuff. It was almost like a sensory episode rather than an intellectual episode.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. And like you said, there's a lot of things there that don't gel. There's a lot of kind of disparate elements that are a bit, and they don't really work. And that, especially the girl in the library, and it was kind of like another Deep Throat kind of.
Yeah, but it was really a teenage
goofy.
Girl.
Yeah, exactly. It was really kind of goofy, and that whole scene, when you've got Mulder interrogating her, and you did it, didn't you? And that. It just seemed very tacked on, like a cop, like a procedural drama.
This is probably Mulder being his most non-Muldery. Actually, that particular scene, it just seemed odd, a little odd for him. Some of the things did. We do get. She's pregnant, and she's pregnant by this boy that was also going out with this girl that's disappeared, and that boy's died, and we don't know why. There's wolves around, and there's like elements of like weird things like burned treetops and glass sand being fused into glass, and the bit I was talking about, but I had the wrong episode, where they go into the bar and they see the guy with the flying saucer tattoo and bits like that.
Which is a terrible tattoo. He says that's a nice tattoo. I was thinking that's the worst tattoo ever.
Yeah, it's funny because that guy is. I always laugh at this episode because that guy is in a film called Revenge of the Nerds. There's a guy called Ogre who's like this big, thick bloke who hates nerds and just goes nerds. And I always remember that film when I see this episode. It's just all these elements, they're kind of cool, but they don't actually tie together in any kind of serious, A to B causality. I did like the stuff with the little kid, little boy. That, again, X-Files harkened something else. That was harking back to Poltergeist somewhat.
Yes.
With the little girl seeing the white noise in the telly and saying, they're here. The little boy says something very similar. He says, it's coming from here, pointing at the telly, he says at one point. And the little boy's pretty good, actually, and the mother's good, actually, good bit of acting. I did like the scene, which is kind of nonsensical, but it's very cool, where the little boy's just filling in loads of bits of paper with ones and noughts, and they don't know what he's doing, and then Scully. They walk into the house and the little boy's on his own. It's very odd. Anyway, Scully goes upstairs and then looks down at all these bits of paper, and she can see a picture of the missing girl. She calls Mulder up. That's in terms of logic, that's silly. Binary doesn't work like that, for example. But it's cool. It's a cool shot. It's probably the best shot in the episode. Actually, I think it's really, really cool. But like I say, I do feel the director had to do a bit of convoluted sort of stuff to add a bit of tension in some of the sort of baggy bits, like the girl in the library and the the interrogation, like you said. And also, I kind of like the fact that this one, it ends with it being kind of covered up, but not because it's a government conspiracy thing. It's because the mother wants to protect her daughter and doesn't want her to go through, a life of being made fun of because of some sort of abduction or whatever it was. She even says, doesn't she, to Mulder, as far as I'm concerned, she's been back on the back of a Harley for 2 weeks. Which is kind of a shame. But we do get, this really does plug into Mulder's story in a much more direct way than the previous ones. There's a scene very early on which is really nice where Mulder's just looking at pictures of the girl that's gone missing. He puts his hand on her, like you can see he's thinking about his own sister. And it's really affecting him. And it also finishes really nicely, doesn't it, where we're listening to the regression therapy tapes of Mulder talking about, his sister disappearing. And he ends with the classic line, I want Mulder just saying, through the tape, I want to believe. It's kind of cool. So not a flawless episode by any means. In many ways, I see Squeeze and Conduit as really being clear demonstrations of the highs and lows of the series. Squeeze being the high point and Conduit showing many of its flaws, but still being interesting,
No, I totally get that. And I think for me, it's the kind of the human aspects, how, like you say at the end, the family doesn't want to say anything. We don't know what's gone on, but it's that human element. They don't want the kind of, the media to kind of be hanging around and everything. And I also think that the bits of Mulder's personal story and how it links in, like I say, that ties back to the first episode, is just great. And they're kind of teased out around, like I completely agree, it's flawed and it's a bit goofy, but his, the quiet scenes with Scully where he's talking about his sister and everything, I thought were fantastic. And at the end, the fact that it's Scully that's listening to the tapes.
Yeah. It's informing her of Mulder. It's basically, again, another thing that will bond them together, I think. Scully, though she's kind of more down the line and slightly standoffish, she's very, I think, empathetic. Gillian Anderson really gets that. She's really good as Scully. She really is, and you kind of understand the relationship between the two. Again, fantastic casting. Really made this series. What would you give this one out of 10?
I think this would be about 6.
Right. We both acknowledge there's weak elements to it, but there's also some rather wonderful elements. So yeah, I could kind of see that score. It's almost like bits of it are 8 and bits of it are 4. Isn't it?
No, yeah, I get that completely. Yeah.
It's a very roller coastery kind of episode.
6 is a nice median.
I'm actually going to be a bit meaner than that. I feel the weaknesses bother me, but having said that, on this rewatching I thought, this is, there's bits of this are really good. But, the girl in the library bit was like, oh man, this is like, if they'd have reworked this story a bit better and given Mulder and Scully something more direct and interesting to do around all this would have been a much better episode. However, I'm just making excuses now. I'd give this a 4 out of 10, actually. I think it's a subpar episode overall. But I do agree with you. There's some wonderful stuff in it, Okay. That brings us to the end of those 4. So hopefully in a few weeks, in 3 or 4 weeks, we'll be back to talk about the next 4, which I think starts with the Jersey Devil and ends with Ice. So I'm looking forward to, and I think there's a few good ones between as well. So I'm looking forward to talking about those. Thanks for coming on, Rebecca. It's been a real pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
So you've got to get on to get that Blu-ray set if you can.
Yeah, I'm going to hunt that down now. Definitely.
And we'll be back in a few weeks. So bye from us.
Bye.